by Dr. Phil Boyle, and he's the first doctor to bring NAPRO to Ireland. You're very welcome, Phil, and nice to see you too. Also joining us is IVF expert Professor Simon Fischel, who is opening a new clinic here shortly, which will offer some people would say controversial new services, and we'll talk about that now. Let's talk about the clinic that you're opening. The aspect that is, some would say, controversial is that you're going to offer the service of pre-screening embryos. Isn't that right?
That's correct, yes. This is at the Beacon Care facility on the Beacon campus. Yeah, that's what we're doing. And
to keep the language as simple for people like myself as possible, will you be able to offer a pre-screening scenario of embryos for diseases like cystic fibrosis or diseases like that?
We can offer two types of screening. Yeah. One is for inherited conditions that exist in the family, and another is what we call random effects on chromosomes. They're the sort of, they're in every single cell virtually, and they're the scaffolding that hold the genes. Yeah. And they randomly cause problems which actually can cause failures to get pregnant, or they can cause miscarriage. And that's a completely different type of screening. And we can do this on eggs, or we can do this on embryos, or we can do it on cells which become the placenta and not the embryo itself.
So what happens when you tell people that the embryo might have a genetic disorder or disease? What's the next step for people?
Well, they come to us specifically for that service. Okay. They hope to embark on a pregnancy free of a condition which may have caused them to have a child to die, or some incredibly devastating disorder.
Disease. So if you tell them that they have an incredibly devastating disorder, which could take in any number of them, yes, what's the general course of action for people?
Well, they're hoping that we will be able to find an embryo that does not have that condition. Okay. We can transfer it to the womb, and they embark on a pregnancy.
So they're inclined to say we don't want
free of that genetic
inclined
disease.
To say we don't want the embryo that is, shall we say, difficult for the person?
That's why they've come to us, to have one that is free of disease. Okay. But importantly, if it doesn't have the disease, it's eradicated from that family forever.
Forever. And if it does, and they say we don't want that, what do you do with that embryo?
We put it into the deep freeze.
For what purpose?
Well, because it's the patient's embryo, it's their decision.
How long do you keep it in deep freezing?
Well, as you know, ours is an international organisation, and it depends on where we work, and we have to work
in Ireland, for example.
In Ireland, for example, we would work with the Irish rules, and there are no particular rules about. In England, for example, you have to dispose of them.
Are there rules in Ireland for this?
There's no legislation about those embryos.
So it's a bit of a Wild West situation.
Absolutely not.
No, but there are no rules.
No. There's regulation in Ireland. Yeah. But no legislation.
And who's doing the regulating?
So the Irish Medicines Board.
Okay.
And they're very good.
I appreciate that entirely. No, just trying to get a handle on how much legislation versus Irish Medical Board regulation, of course, is a big difference, as you know. In your clinic, for example, would I be able to choose the gender of my child?
Absolutely not.
No. But could you tell me if I asked you politely?
No, because...
But can you tell medically?
We can tell medically, but the clinical staff, the embryologist, they don't know that. So they could not even have that information.
What is a saviour sibling? Could you explain that to me?
Yes, that is very briefly, if a couple have a child that has a devastating disorder, life-threatening, but there is potentially a simple cure for this, and that is to have stem cells from, say, the bone marrow. Yeah. We know about bone marrow transplantation. Sure. And all the World Banks have been screened, and there's not a match. Mm-hmm. A lot of those couples are told the only chance for your child to survive is to go ahead and roll the reproductive dice. Have another child, and maybe with a bit of luck, that child will be a tissue match. Okay. And what happens in those situations? They may have more children with a disease. They may have more children who don't have the disease while they're watching their child die. So they come to us and they say, can you, with IVF, check that another baby that we want doesn't have this devastating disorder, and at the same time, can it be a tissue match for my sick child? Now, we can do that. And we can transfer an embryo that is tissue matched and also free of disease. And so they'll have another child that they want, but it could also save the life of the sibling.
Becomes the saviour sibling. Yeah. If I was a woman of the age of approximately 25 or thereabouts, and I want to have my eggs frozen with a view to coming back at the age of 45 to be pregnant, is this an option?
This is breakthrough technology that we now have. We can freeze eggs very efficiently.
So that's a yes, is it? I mean, I'm not being confrontational.
No, absolutely. Yeah. We never used to be able to.
But we can. So science has moved on.
The important thing is it's moved on, and it's now very effective. So you can preserve fertility for females like we used to be able to and can do for men.
Dr. Phil Boyle, the pre-screening of embryos, is this something you're comfortable with?
Is it something I'm comfortable with? Well, it's not a thing that affects me directly or personally.
But are you comfortable with it?
No.
Why not?
Well, I guess, first of all, just to preface it a little bit, that I met Simon, my neighbour, for the first time just inside, and I was telling him I don't want to go fighting with you.
No, it's not about fighting, it's about science, discussing science.
I know, exactly. So but it's just that what it is that you're looking at an embryo, which is a unique human individual at the earliest stages of its existence. So scientifically and medically, you say, this is another new human individual.
So this is life begins. Do you have a specific as to when life begins?
Well, it's a scientific medical question as to does life begin at fertilization or not, and science and medicine would have to say that it does.
And your answer is the same?
Well, I have to say it's the wrong question, because life is in all our cells.
So why don't you ask the question then?
Well, when does a person begin? Well, when did you become you? It's a continuum.
Yes.
We know, for example, a fertilized egg, 70% of them are non-viable. They will never go on to produce a baby. We also know that the products of fertilization can produce devastating problems. They could produce what we call a blighted ovum. A woman will think she's pregnant and all she's got is placental cells.
Okay.
And many of them, even choriocarcinomas, they're not human individuals, they're a ball of cells.
Is it immoral, do you think? I'm just trying to get a handle of where you're coming from. Do you think it's immoral, the pre-screening?
Well, I think it helps if you look at the science and the facts first, and you say, okay, we all have living cells, that's true, but then we have gametes, and gametes have half of the man and half of the woman, and they come together, and there's a new human life. So when that new human life is there, there's a new individual organism that is going to continue to grow and exist and survive.
Can you give me a yes or no on is it immoral?
Is it immoral? I would pose the question.
Can you give me a yes or no?
A yes or no answer?
Yeah.
I would say for me it would be immoral to destroy a life after conception.
You only treat married couples. Why is that?
Well, because I've signed up to the American Academy of Fertility Care Professionals, and that's the code of ethics that we have to abide by. And
what's the
every
thinking behind
fertility
that?
clinic has a code of ethics that says, well, here are the criteria whereby we'll decide you could accept people or not. And it's interesting because we looked at the Harry data, the IVF unit in Dublin, and one of the first things it says, we would like couples to be married, or this, or this, or this, and it gives other criteria. So every clinic applies some kind of discrimination.
Is it a prejudice? Do you think it prejudices against non-married couples, or
it could be perceived that way, and sometimes it is. But I thought it was interesting. The first couple that was on, they said we were together about 20 years, and about eight years ago we got married. We said, look, we're thinking of having kids. Let's get married and have kids. So it's a little bit of a red herring, because most couples in Ireland currently decide to get married and then have kids. The vast majority. Many.
And I noticed you're wearing a little badge in your lapel this evening. What is that?
They're little baby's feet, unborn child at 10 weeks.
Thank you. Okay, very good. Anyone in the audience want to comment on what we're hearing tonight? Lady in the front of the audience, what's going through your mind as you're listening?
I'd have to say I just profoundly disagree with Dr. Fischel's the screening of the embryos. The whole point of the process is basically to destroy that unborn life if it's found to have a disability. And it's just quite disturbing that people with disabilities are being discriminated like this, and that is becoming acceptable in society. 9 years ago we held the Special Olympics here in Ireland, and we were celebrating the achievements of people with disabilities, whereas now this very disturbing ideology is kind of creeping in, whereby we are allowed to discriminate against them and actually weed them out of society. And it's the start of a slippery slope. We see many countries in Asia where they are now using sex selection for embryos, whereby a lot of them don't want women. And Dr. Fisher was very emphatic with yourself there, saying that no, he would not allow sex selection. But why is it acceptable to discriminate against somebody based on their ability but not on their gender? The
slippery slope. This is the argument you're going to meet quite a lot. Do you want to comment on that?
Well, I think you would know that this is not against people who have disabilities at all. This is about the freedom. Now, this is about the freedom of choice for individual families.
But it is. You're deliberately targeting people with disabilities, and you're destroying them. So,
we're trying to help couples who have gone through enormous pain and suffering. And this is about helping them in their personal family choice.
Okay, we could go. Is there anyone else who wants to comment on what you're hearing tonight? No one else? Do you want to? Oh, sorry, excuse me, you're right beside me. Excuse me, I couldn't see you.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that what Dr. Fischel is proposing, he's kind of suggesting that the genetic screening of embryos is, you know, for disabilities that are inherited through families, and that is somewhat like a cure. But it's not. What he's doing is he's not eliminating the disease. He's eliminating the people who would suffer from the disease, which is what the embryo is. We all started at some point. We were all embryos at one stage, and you know, the embryo is the very beginning in a continuum of life, as somebody mentioned there.
Okay, and that is again a debate that will keep the philosophers in business for years to come, and others beside. Dr. Deirdre Madden, you're with the Law Department, is that right, in UCC? We've heard about regulation and the Irish Medical Board, but we're not hearing too much about legislation. Why is that?
Well, I suppose there's two aspects to this, Ryan. The first aspect is the safety and quality aspect of the treatment, to make sure that when couples go to a clinic that they receive safe care, that they're appropriately qualified clinicians in appropriate facilities and so on. And there is regulation around that by the Irish Medicines Board and to some extent by the Medical Council, which regulates doctors in this country. The public policy aspects, such as whether embryo pre-screening should be allowed, what happens to embryos if a couple divorce, should a child be able to access the identity of the sperm donor.
Any of that?
There's no legislation
no.
on
Why
that.
is that?
Well, I think it's a very difficult area to legislate for because we don't really have a sense of, I suppose, what public opinion is.
Do you think if you were a Minister for Health, or indeed for Justice, you'd be scared stiff at this because of the nature of it and this country's relationship with the unborn and so forth, the sort of political debate that comes out of such a sensitive issue? Do you think there's a bit of running scared about that?
Well, undoubtedly it is a difficult issue, but I don't think that that detracts from the responsibility that the government has. It does have a responsibility, in my view, to legislate in this area to make sure that there's certainty for couples and for the children that are born as a result of these treatments.
Do you want to come back in there, Jimmy? Sorry.
We weren't asked when we went to Phil Boyle's clinic whether we were married or not.
Yeah,
it didn't even come up.
It worked for you, that method, right?
It did, yeah.
If you hadn't been married, you happened to just be two people who were in love, you wouldn't have your baby today. Arguably, because the gentleman won't let you.
But he wouldn't. He didn't ask us.
Yeah.
His colleague didn't ask us. They were so enthusiastic to help us. It just didn't. It didn't enter. You know, there was no conversation. There was no such thing as bringing your.
Well, he
marriage
wouldn't be very
certificate.
happy if you found out you weren't married, would he?
I don't know whether.
According to the rules, you're not. You're meant to be.
Well, I don't know. Well, rules sometimes you plead innocent. I didn't know.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
so he could have got away in you there. you were lucky.
I'm sure it happens.
I'm sure it happens on occasion. I'm sure you wouldn't object to it too much either. Okay, we have to leave it there, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks indeed to our medical experts this evening and to the fibrosis or diseases like that.
We can offer two types of screening.
Yeah.
One is for inherited conditions that exist in the family, and another is what we call random effects on chromosomes. They're the sort of they're in every
controversial new services, and we'll talk about that now. Let's talk about the clinic that you're opening. The aspect that is, some would say, controversial is that you're going to offer the service of pre-screening embryos. Isn't that right?
That's correct.
By Dr. Phil Boyle, and he's the first doctor to bring NAPRO to Ireland. You're very welcome, Phil, and nice to see you too. Also joining us is IVF expert Professor Simon Fischel, who is opening a new clinic here shortly, which will offer some people.
Correct. Yes, this is at the Beacon Care Fertility on the Beacon campus. Yeah, that's what we're doing.
And to keep the language as simple for people like myself as possible, will you be able to offer a pre-screening scenario of embryos for diseases like
single cell virtually, and another scaffolding that hold the genes, and they randomly cause problems which actually can cause failures to get pregnant, or they can cause miscarriage, and that's a completely different type of screening, and we can do this